Hey guys, let's start English lecture number 4, verb conjugations and tenses. This lecture is the hardest one that you will ever do. Sorry, it's just that hard. I've tried very hard to make a compromise, and I think I found a good median between being very hard and being overly simplified. So I'm going to try to keep this as short and succinct as possible. I hope you guys learn a lot this lecture. In this lecture, you're going to learn about conjugations, verb tenses and placement, and the difference between regular and irregular verbs. I know that we planned to do something different, however, that won't happen just because of how lengthy and how much depth is in this lecture. So maybe we'll do it next lecture and maybe we won't. We'll just have to see on how well you guys respond to this lecture. So regular versus irregular verbs. You might want to pause the video here so you can read the slide. However, regular and irregular verbs are very simple. At the end of the lecture, I'm going to leave a link for you to understand so that you can see the differences between regular and irregular verbs, an entire compiled list of all the irregular verbs. However, for now, all you have to know is a regular verb follows a pattern of the verb itself. If you want to extend past tense, you say d or ed to the end of it. And if you want to do future tense, then all you do is add will in front of it. However, irregular verbs work a little bit differently, and you'll learn more about them as we go about this. So in English, there are 6 tenses: simple present, present perfect, simple past, past perfect, future, and future perfect. Let's go over them. Simple present is something that you are doing right now, right this very second. You breathe, I breathe, we breathe, so on and so forth. The simple present is something that is happening right now, continuously and forever. The present perfect. Present perfect refers to an action that started in the past but is still going. This is the difference between me saying I applied for a job and I have applied for a job. I applied for a job is a past tense statement. It says that at some point in the past, I applied for a job. Present perfect means that it happened in the past and is still continuing today. So I have applied for a job means that you don't know what the answer is yet, or you're still waiting on the application, whatever the reason may be. I have applied for a job is still in the present. Simple past are things that are over and done with. That's it. The action is over. Past perfect are things that have happened before something else. In this example, I have 2 verbs for you: applied and written. You can see here that applied is simple past. Simple past means that the thing is over. I applied for a job. That's it. It's over. It's done with. With a resume I had written. Past perfect is something that happened before the past. And so you wrote the resume and then you applied for the job, if that makes sense. Then you have the future. That's just something that hasn't happened yet. And then you have future perfect. Future perfect is something that will happen at a specific point in the future. So you can see here, by Saturday, I will have applied for the job. Not yet, you haven't, but you will at a time in the future. Okay, in many languages, when the subject changes, when we say the boy or the man or the woman or they or he or she, the verb changes. In English, it does not. In English, you can see, for instance, the boy runs, but the boy and his friends run. That's the only difference that you'll ever see, is in the difference between singular and plural and in the present tense. Outside of that, the verb will always stay the same. I swim, they swim, we swim. I write, he writes, she writes, we write. So on and so forth. Okay, I know that this is confusing, but you're going to have to bear with me. If you ever have any problems with conjugation, please, please, please message me or comment on the Facebook page. I will try my absolute best to get back to you. So let's practice a little bit. I blank to Greece until Sally and I went there last summer. A, have never been. B, had never been. C, was never being. Pause the video here, take a few seconds to think about it. When you have the answer, move on. Hey, you, comma, at the computer all day. You should really take a break now. A, have been sitting. B, were sitting. C, did sit. Whenever you're ready, answer the blank and move on. If you're not ready, pause the video. She blank lunch when someone rang the doorbell. A, was preparing. B, prepared. C, had been preparing. Pause the video, otherwise we're going to move on to the answers. For number 1, the answer would be B, because we are trying to express past tense. I have never been to Greece until Sally and I went there last summer. That's not correct. I had never been to Greece until Sally and I went there last summer. I was never being to Greece until Sally and I went there last summer. So let's look at this in sense of what we're trying to do. Obviously, you know that this happened at some point in the past because he says last summer. So was is gone just because it has being in it. Being is present tense. Okay, we'll discuss this next video. Being is present tense. So we have 2 answers left. Have and had and been because both of those represent past. So I have never been to Greece until Sally and I went there last summer, and I had never been to Greece until Sally and I went there last year. So we have to figure out why it's had and not have. If anybody has the answer, I would say you can move on. If not, we're going to discuss the differences between have and had for a little bit. Have represents the ownership of something in present tense. Had represents past tense. I have a book is still present. I had a book is past. If that makes sense to you, then you know why we got rid of C. It's the same reason we got rid of A. So the answer number 1 is B. The answer number 2 is, hey, you, blank, at the computer all day. You should really take a break now. I have been sitting. I were sitting. Did sit. Let's look. If this was present tense, then were sitting would have made sense, because were sitting would imply that you had been sitting up until this point and then you're no longer sitting there. So we know it can't be B. Hey, you did sit at the computer all day has the same problem as B. Hey, you have been sitting. Have been sitting means that it's still happening right now and that they're telling you to take a break because you've been doing it all day. She was preparing lunch. She prepared lunch. She had been preparing lunch. In this, the answer is A. Again, she was preparing lunch. Why? Because this is past perfect. Or this is actually, sorry, that's my bad. Take that back. This is simple past. She was preparing lunch, and then she stopped when somebody rang the doorbell. If she prepared lunch, that would mean that it had already happened and that the situation had ended. If she had been preparing lunch, that would mean that the situation was continued up until that point. However, has is not the correct word here. So she was preparing lunch until somebody rang the doorbell. Let's go back over these. I know it's a little bit confusing. We're just going to discuss it one last time. Okay, here. I had never been to Greece until Sally and I went there last summer. Again, this is what? This is present perfect, and we're discussing why it didn't happen. Because it continued up until a point and then stopped. Here, again, it continues up until a point and then stops. And here, continues up until a point and stops. The important thing to remember is what point did it stop at? Okay, let's move on to your homework. I know this is really confusing. Homework is to study the list of irregular verbs and write me a paragraph telling me a story using at least 4 of the irregular verbs. The story has to make sense. Mind your verb tenses. Use as many regular verbs as you like. Thanks. Good luck. God bless. Have a good time.